Anybody, anywhere,
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen.
This pass caught by Paulsen, the tight end.
And from 106.7 The Fan, Grant Paulsen.
Welcome in to Take Command with 10-year NFL tight end Logan Paulsen. I'm Grant Paulsen. Thank you for making the show part of your audio rotation. You can always watch us, 106.7 The Fan, Team 980 YouTube channels. You can listen to the pod wherever you get your audio. We're giving you 2 episodes a week anytime Commanders news breaks. All offseason, we're also diving deep into the NFL draft. And today, I think we're going to be a little bit more draft-centric in our breakdown. So we're going to take advantage of Logan's travels. He's at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama this week. He was at the Shrine Bowl in Frisco, Texas last week at the Star in Dallas. So there's a lot we can cover. Logan, first of all, how are our travels finding you here? Where in the world is Logan Paulsen? How's Alabama?
Alabama's good. It's a little bit colder than it was last year. Like last year, I remember I came out and I ended up getting sunburned and kind of sweating and not having enough T-shirts. And then this year I checked the weather. I was like, oh, it'll be in the 50s. But then I forgot that practice will be in the evening. They've moved practice from the morning because it used to start at 8 or it used to start at 9 and end up around 1:30, 2 o'clock. And now it starts at 2 and ends at like 6:37. So you're going to be out here freezing your tail off because it gets into the kind of the 20s at night. So I don't know if I packed enough long underwear. Just I can't seem to get Mobile right. Can't seem to get it pegged at this time of year. Yeah,
year by year, it is. So I remember one year getting so burnt down there at those practices because at that time, I don't know if it still is, but it was at like what they called Lad Peebles Stadium, which is, you know, the equivalent of like a high school stadium where you're just sitting on bleachers. The coolest thing about the event, and the reason everybody talks about the event, for those of you that are listening from like a media standpoint. So it's twofold. One, people like Logan who are good at evaluating players can actually go. You have access to the practices. And I mean, that's invaluable. For a few days, you get to watch guys work out and practice. You get one-on-one drills, team drills. It's kind of like being at an NFL training camp. And there's just so much that you can glean. For the teams, they love it because they get that same access. But then they also get to interview these players. So you'll see them chopping it up with guys on the field after practices. There's access to the players as well. So there's a lot of boxes they get to check. The reason I loved it as a media member, it was a little bit of a convention, right? You've got tons of team officials down there. So it was a great opportunity for me to meet other executives and scouts and people from other teams. Obviously, a lot of draft insiders and then also other media members. So that was always helpful. But the thing I really loved, Logan, is like you sit at the stadium on the bleachers watching this practice wherever you want to, and the executives are just mingling within you. It's like this really cool thing. So Adam Peters literally might be sitting on the bleachers 3 feet to my right, and Brandon Beane of the Bills might be 3 feet to my left. And then 2 feet behind me is, you know, the general manager of the Chicago Bears, Ryan Poles. Like, it is wild. So that access is pretty unprecedented.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. And again, like when I first started coming, that's how it was. And now they've kind of changed it where like the cool kids sit on one side of the stadium and like the media and the scout, they kind of sit on the other side of the stadium. So it is what it is. But however, like if you get field access, which a lot of media guys do, you can go down and you'll watch. Remember one year I was standing like next to Mike Tomlin. We were watching one-on-ones together. Like, you know, not together, but he was right next to me. And so you do have this kind of really weird, these moments here that you don't get anywhere else where you get to kind of hang out with those NFL people. But I'm really glad you brought up the interviews because everyone talks about the practice all the time. But really, like I was talking to a scout last year, and he's like, you only get really 3 opportunities to talk to a player, right? It's like at a bowl game, so Hula, Shrine, American Bowl, Senior Bowl, right? Whatever bowl game it looks like, the combine, and then you get that 30 for 30 visit, you know, where like they can come out for 24 hours or whatever it is. And so it's like, you know, the local scout knows the kid probably pretty well, but for the team to get to know him, like this is a huge event, right? To kind of get the feel for the personality. And so everyone talks about the practice. Well, that's extremely important. The stuff that happens in the morning with the interviews is maybe the most important thing that happens this week.
So when you go down there, there's dozens of players. It's overwhelming. You're only going to get a few practices in. Like, what are you doing? Are you saying, okay, I'm going to watch the edges, and then on one-on-ones, you're really zeroing in on a position group because you know Washington needs one? Or what? How are you going about this as an evaluator?
Yeah, so I think that's part of it. I think it's important to remember what this event is. Like everyone always says, like, oh, Logan, you don't talk about the defensive backs, you don't talk about the linebackers that much. Like this event is really offensive, defensive line, and wide receiver tight ends. Like that's really what it is. And what I mean by that, because like one-on-ones are so geared to those skill sets, like the offensive line, defensive line, like that's like what they do. It's such a microcosm. So you get to see really acutely how the offensive lineman kicks, how he moves, how he uses his hands, the power that a rusher uses. For the receivers and the DBs, like I expect the receiver to win. So if the DB wins, I'm like, let me write a note. Like maybe this guy's got some ball, like can cover or whatever. But I'm really expecting the receiver to show out. I'm really expecting the tight end to show out. And so that's when I come out of these events. Like obviously there's notes about the DBs, and there's some really good defensive backs here. The kid from San Diego State, the kid from Tennessee might be the two highest drafted players at this event. But in reality, like this is a offensive thing. One-on-ones are one-on-one for the receivers is offensive. One-on-one for the defensive line is a defensive thing. So I really expect those position groups to show out and perform at a high level. So what I'm kind of doing is I'm watching, I'm taking notes, and if someone pops, I write their name down. I'm trying to be totally agnostic, trying to treat the event as the event. And then if it's someone I've watched, I kind of say, how does that compare to what I saw on film? If it's someone that I haven't watched, I say, I got to make sure I watch this guy. And then the other thing I do is if there's a guy that I've watched, I kind of watch how they are in between drills. Are they running between drills? Are they kind of lollygagging around? Are they tired? Are they whatever? Just to see how they're handling some of the finer points of this interview, this job interview. So it's not only the reps, but it's kind of how they are on the field. Like I remember a couple of years ago, there was a receiver that I was very, very high on. But he would kind of walk in between drills. He'd be the last in line. He'd let people cut him. He wouldn't really do any of the physical drills, like to do blocking drills and stuff. He wouldn't do that stuff. And so I was like, well, how much does that guy really love ball? And so like, even though he's extremely talented, like I would, if I was a GM, it's silly, but I would dock him down the list. And people say, Logan, that's so dumb. If he's talented, you draft him. My thing is, it's like, I want dudes who are passionate about football. They love football. Because if you don't love football, man, like how are you going to get better? How are you going to improve independent of me having my foot firmly up in terms of a motivating factor? You know what I'm saying? So like that kind of stuff is, to me, is important because that's what they're doing with the interview. That's what I'm doing with the practice.
And that receiver was Jackson Smith in Jigba.
Yeah, right. Perfect. Yeah. No, it was, I know I'm not going to say his
you
name,
don't even need to throw him under the bus, but I would imagine it's not a guy that everybody's heard of making money, 7, 8 catches every single week. I'm imagining that when you mentioned San Diego State, you're talking corner Chris Johnson.
Yes.
He's considered one of the better players at this event. He is getting a lot of buzz right now. Corner, San Diego State, named Mountain West Co-Defensive Player of the Year after this past year. He had 4 interceptions, 2 of which he returned for touchdowns. So he flashed like a strobe light at points this year. All right, so then when you are watching, let's divvy it up into position groups. What's the early buzz on what's strong there and what isn't? I know when I used to cover this event, you always had a pretty good feel for like, oh, this is a really good year for the edges or the O-line or whatever. And then my other question would be, how much did that change? Because unfortunately and understandably, we lost a lot of the biggest names in this event who played in the college football playoffs all the way into the championship round that have pulled out over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think initially it was going to be defensive line kind of, hands like head over heel, like no questions asked, because you had David Bailey, you had the 2 guys from Miami, you just had some really excellent depth pieces. And again, like this is the first year that I've been covering this event where it looked like there was going to be 3 dudes who could have gone close to the top 10 at the event. And so you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be fantastic. Obviously they pull out for whatever reason that they give. Again, I'm not faulting those guys because like they're about to make a lot of money. They got to get healthy. They got to get ready to run fast at the combine. But I do still think that there are some very, very talented defensive linemen here. And like what I love about the event is like you go watch one-on-ones from yesterday and you're like, man, like that guy's a little bit more twitched up than I thought. That guy's got a little bit more length than I thought. That guy has more pass rush diversity than I thought. And so, you look at like Derrick Moore from Michigan, and he was on my list and I've watched him. But to see him like it's not just his, obviously has the explosive rep against Markel Bell yesterday where he knocks him on the ground. But to me, it's more like how his energy that he brings. Like he is hooting and hollering, like he is juiced up, and like that counts for something for me, right? He measures in, his arms are 34 inches long. He's not a tall guy, but to have that length with that height is interesting. Zion Young from Missouri is another guy that's like 6'5", 265, long arms. And so Danny Dennis Sutton from Penn State, same type of deal, like these traitsy guys. And then TJ Parker, like those guys are good football players. And initially, maybe I thought one of those guys would be available for Washington when they were picking in the third round. But the more I watch them, the more I'm like, man, like this is going to be a very heavy D-line group in the first 2 rounds, I would think, just because I feel like there's a lot of really talented pieces there. And so, again, like there's a
I wonder if that informs Washington's decision in any way, because they obviously need so much help. We've talked about getting an edge at 7. I'm starting to think, and we'll get way closer to this thing and get a better beat on this, but there's a really good chance David Bailey doesn't get to them. Let's say he does. Yeah. Then it's, you take him and you run it up to the podium. I think there's a few guys like that, him, Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs, you could feel good about. But there's a very good reality here, or legitimate reality, where Downs is gone. I saw him mocked at 2 yesterday by one of the top guys, that where David Bailey is gone. And I don't know if there's an edge there that makes as much sense at 7. But if you're telling me you feel like maybe the D-line, both internal, external, is pretty deep. I know they don't have a second-round pick. I'm not convinced they won't. Like, there's still some things they could do. You could move back. You could add a second-round pick. That's got to inform the decision in some way if you feel like you can get a guy in round 2 or in round 3 eventually that can help you.
No, I think that's exactly right, Grant. But the thing right now, at least the way I understand the top 10 picks, again, Washington's picking in 7, so very relevant, is there's a lot of what I would characterize as blue-chip defensive players there. Like, I don't know if Ruben Bain is a true top 10 pick, but if you picked him at 7, I'm not going to freak out about it, right? Because the college production there, the Ben's there. The other one that I think people are forgetting about is Keldrick Falk from Auburn. Like, of those 3 guys, those 3 top guys, you're talking David Bailey, Ruben Bain, Keldrick Falk, I would also put in that group. A lot of people have him in that 15 range. To me, he is like the unicorn of this class from a physical standpoint. He just turned 20 in January, end of the year, end of the football season, turned 20 years old. He's 6'6", he's 290, he has inside-outside flexibility. He's one of those 3 guys I just mentioned, by far the best run defender. He has this great dexterity. He's not this player, but he reminds me a little bit of stature and kind of movement skills of Julius Peppers, like that kind of vibe. And he's 20 years old. And so to me, I could see somebody falling in love with him. And talk about a guy that's defensive agnostic, can rush as a 3, rushes a nose, rushes an end. Again, production was down a little bit this year. But, man, I love his tape. And he's a guy that, again, so to me at 7, there will be a defensive player there that you like and you can take, right? We talked about Sonny Styles. We talked about Caleb Downs. There's the 3 edge rushers there. There's a lot of pieces there that get you really excited. And, again, honestly, this is going to sound crazy, but Jordan Love at 7, I know that's kind of taboo. That's how good he is, right? Where you could consider taking a running back there. But to your original point, that does inform what you do at 71, I think, right? If you don't have a second round pick, you got to look at how dense the draft is when you're picking around 71.
I'm going to be thrilled with almost whatever they do. It feels like the defensive coordinator search. I said yesterday, there were more good options than there were seats to sit in. And so you're eventually, when the music stops, someone's going to sit down. You're going to feel okay about it, musical chair style. I feel that way about 7, right? And that's not to say that I don't want a couple of guys more. Sonny Styles is kind of becoming my man crush the more I watch him. There's a couple other players. They're going to be fine. But I guess I will be bummed out if they don't have a second-round pick. They just need so much. Yeah. And I know that's hypocritical, and I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, because you almost certainly don't pick at 7 and somehow get a second-round pick. But last year they made the fewest picks in the draft. This year they're on pace to do that again. That's just not a good practice. You can't get where they need to go doing that very often. And so 2 straight years early in this program would be tough to do that for me. Real quick on Falk, you mentioned Peppers. He's that action figure build of a Montez Sweat for people. He's 6'6", with that length and the 280. One thing about him, and we have not talked about him at all, you and I, even off air at this point, but one thing when he comes up that does bother me, last year, so 2024, the year before this past one, he had 11 TFLs and 7 sacks. This year in 12 games, he had 5 TFLs and 2 sacks. I know this sounds like just an old guy take. I get bothered by guys that don't have numbers in college. So when you don't have many TFLs or sacks, And I'm going to take you at 7 overall, and I'm expecting you to get a sack on opening day against the freaking Eagles. Like, I don't know, man. I want more numbers. Why didn't he?
I'll say this about him, man. Like when I watched him, so again, his pressure numbers are really good too. Like his ability to create pressure is a big thing. And so like I remember watching the Alabama game, and I watched I think maybe the Florida game with him. And Caleb Proctor is going to be probably a first round pick, but definitely a top 50 pick in the draft. He's a left tackle for Alabama, and obviously like those dudes are going to war with each other. But again, like when I see an NFL player in Caleb Proctor and an NFL player in Keldrick Falk, and Keldrick Falk kind of like gets after your butt, I'm kind of like, that guy's got something to him, right? And I think the fact that they played him all over the front. He's playing nose, he's playing 3, he's playing 5, he's playing 4-eye. And I do think that flexibility is his superpower, but it also limits his production. Because I think he had, I want to say, in that game I charted him, I think he had 7 rushes as a true defensive end, and I think he had 3 pressures. So, like, to me, it's like, you want him on the interior because he's so good at stopping the run. He's so good at using his hands. Like, his ability to sink his hip and, like, split double teams is really, really good. But what if you give that guy a full-time edge opportunity, and he's actually rushing on 3rd down, and he's rushing on 1st and 2nd down because he's not playing the run as much? So, to me, I think his demise in production was because he's so good at all these other kind of dirty work jobs. And again, like the fact that he's so young, that he's so big, he's so explosive. To me, like everyone draws the comparison between him and the guy that went to the 49ers last year. I can't remember his name right now. Williams, I think, from Georgia, who's this long, traitsy, pass rush kind of, in a dream kind of guy.
Michael Williams?
Yeah, Michael Williams. Keldrick Falk is a different animal because his technique and his production is so much better. So again, I know we're talking about Senior Bowl. We're talking about Keldrick Falk. He's not even here. But to me, he's a guy that I think as we get closer to the day to the draft, people will be talking about him as a top 10 pick.
I don't want to go too far into him, but now I'm just curious really quick. How is he so good at stopping the run at 6'6" on the interior? Because one of the things we talked about with like Kinlaw and some other guys, for me, when you're that big and you're on the inside, it's really hard to be low and not get moved.
So it's a great question. And this is like, I'm going to get a little technical here because again, this is one of those things that I really like. I watch a lot of this because I have a lot of defensive ends that I consult with. So what I'll say is like, first off, he uses his hands tremendously. Some guys are long, but their hands are on the shoulder pads. They get one hand in. He's 2 hands on the breastplate, and he has a great feel for kind of like pressure and counter pressure with his hands. The other thing that he's a tall player, but he has a really good ability to do is like when you're splitting a double team, you need to be able to access your hips and your ankles, right? So I need to be able to sink into that position and then rotate. And so all these guys you're talking about, Kinlaw, for example, has got really long legs. He's really high cut, and he has a hard time sinking, bending his knee, ankle, and hip at the same time and absorbing that force and then rotating out of it. That's why I think Keldrick Falk is so special, because he is tall and he has this great ability to sink, rotate, access his hips, and use his hands at a high level. So, again, not all tall players are bad against the run, but traditionally they're not great. Like, so for example, there's a defensive tackle here from Texas Tech who's 330 pounds. He'll probably go top 75 as a player. Good player. I'm a little worried about him because when I see him get double teamed, he gets thrown out of the club because he doesn't access his hip ankle very well in terms of bending and sinking, right? And so, it's a little bit of that's who he is, and you can live with that because he's productive in other areas. But I think that's the thing about Keldrick is it's big athlete, long arms, but also the hidden athleticism of kind of that hippie bendiness that makes him so dangerous against the run.
It's interesting because I had Logan come over to help me shovel out of the snow the other day, and he kind of had his hands on my hips, and he said, "You're not accessing your hips and your ankles while you're shoveling the snow."
Yeah, it's important. It's important.
So there's multiple ways that you have to access your hips and your ankles. No, that's a good breakdown, and that answers my question. I mean, I just think normally I look at a guy like that with his size, and I'm going, all right, he's not going to be able to help you on the inside very much. All right, I want to get back into some of the guys that stood out to you from a Senior Bowl, day one perspective, or just in general that you're excited to watch down there, and then we'll get into some of the guys you've already been to the Shrine Bowl who you really like there. We'll do that next on Take Command. Welcome back to Take Command. Logan Paulsen, Grant Paulsen, diving into some draft prospects. It's draft season in a sense. Last week was the Shrine Bowl. This week is the Senior Bowl. These are the two marquee events, bowls, so to speak, that everybody descends, on a city to go watch prospects and get a little deeper file on some of the guys. Most of the time, frankly, not the top end of the first round guys that we've been talking about for months, but some, mid-round types are all over these rosters. So then let's start with the Senior Bowl, the guys you're most interested in, the guys that you think could end up helping themselves this week that you can't wait to put eyeballs on in Mobile.
Yeah, and we already talked about some of the guys. Derrick Moore is a guy that really surprised me yesterday in terms of how he moved, the length, the physicality, a little surprising. TJ Parker, a guy at Clemson this last year who was very, very quiet, not overly productive. Again, nobody from Clemson was. But to see him come out using a great long arm, having some good pass rush bend, some good movement skills. Again, this is a tough event for me because I keep thinking about 7 and I keep thinking about 71. Like, there's no way that guy's there, right? Like, because he's probably going to go back into the first round, maybe in the 20s. And then you get a guy. So then Derrick Moore, again, if he has a good performance this week, is probably going to go in the second round. Zion Young from Missouri, same type of thing. So the guy that kind of jumped out to me was Danny Dennis-Sitton. If you don't go defensive end at 7, Dennis Denny-Sitton from Penn State is like this kind of freaky dude that was not overly productive at Penn State. Again, I've talked to a guy from there, from the school, and he said, I think he was a little bit miscast in terms of like usage, and which is totally fine. But he's like a Marvel superhero. He's 6'6", he's 268, he's got 34-inch arms. Like, he is a big, well put together son of a gun. But does the lack of production there at Penn State and the lack of him not being a top shelf, he's a good athlete, but not a great athlete, does that get him down to the 71 range? And again, like, there's a guy that in the third round, I think could be a starting caliber player for you with some upside ceiling because of the physicality, right? So again, those are some guys.
Real quick. So TJ Parker, the edge from Clemson you mentioned, who's not going to get to 71, you said.
Yeah.
What's interesting about him is I always like players like this, by the way. Like, if you look at it, he was supposed to have gone in the top 10, according to all the experts, coming into the year. He was like a slam dunk lottery pick, consensus guy, to the point where some of the guys I really like Dane Brugler from The Athletic, had him going 9th overall before the season started. Ryan Wilson, CBS, 8th overall. Mike Renner, 8th overall. Nate Tice, Yahoo, 6th overall. It's like he was that dude. And then the year that he had at Clemson, 5 sacks, which is 6 fewer than last year. Some of the numbers, I'm sure there are other things. He missed a couple of games, whatever. That ends up dinging him. So now he gets pushed down the board a little bit. But you're referencing now Danny Dennis-Sutton. And he's not a guy that has that same, discussion or conversation about being near the top of the board. And maybe he is there for them. I guess he's probably hoping to go somewhere, what would you say, like second round, mid to late second round, and then he's gone before Washington picks early third. That's kind of his hope.
Yeah, I think so. Like, if he has a good week this week and tests well, like, I could see him going like, shoot, like, just because of the frame, like high second, like second round player again. But if something doesn't go well, the testing doesn't go well, he doesn't have a great week this week, he's sitting there in the third round as a player with some big time upside. And there's a couple guys like that, which is why this event I think is always so fun, because like, you get these guys that are really traitsy, that are semi-productive in college. And, like the other guy is Vincent Anthony Jr. from Duke, right? He's 6'6", he's 255, he's long, he's very, very raw. Like, watching his one-on-one reps yesterday, like, he has everything you want physically, but is just like a little bit of a wild horse out there. And so, like, he'll probably end up sliding to the third. You look at that and you say to yourself, like, do we believe in our defensive culture here to bring this guy along and make him better, right? So those are some guys that I think are interesting. Obviously, Romello Height from Texas Tech is the other guy, another edge rusher. I don't know what to do with him. Very talented. I think he had 11 sacks this year at Texas Tech. But, he weighed in at 235. He's 6'2.5". He's 25 years old. Like, what do you do with a guy like that who's just kind of a situational pass rusher? But, again, with this Brian Flores defense coming in, you got these stand-up players on the edge. Like, he does do some of that and bring some pass rush upside. So maybe you get in this land of like misfit toys where it's not right for everybody, but it's right for you, and you get a good value pick there at 71.
So that's one of the positions of need for Washington, and some thoughts. How about wide receiver? I've seen where there's actually a couple of really high-end wide receivers that could move up the board at this event. I know Kevin Coleman from Missouri is someone who people are really intrigued by. He's not a physically imposing guy by any means. I think he measured in at 5'11" and 175, but he was super productive in the SEC. What did you think of the wide receiver group that ended up being on the roster?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because you do have kind of two different guys. You have guys like Kevin Coleman, who I think he's 5'8". Like, he's not a big man, but hyper sudden in the short area, kind of like your classic slot receiver. There's a bunch of guys like that. Baron Brown from LSU, very similar, right? Kind of a return specialist, small, undersized kind of guy. The other guy whose name escapes me at the moment. There's another kind of smaller, twitched up guy that is very productive in college. And so you kind of say there's that. And then there's also these big guys. There's Caleb Douglas from Texas Tech, who's 6'4". He's got 33-inch arms, right? You got Ted Hurst from Georgia State, who's 6'3". I think he had 33-inch arms, which is crazy for a wide receiver. He had this great one-handed catch yesterday. And I was not familiar with Ted Hurst's game. I'm going to tell you that right now. It looks like my man can run a little bit. For a big receiver to be able to run like that, that's something that's intriguing. The problem is, once everybody sees that here, they go from being a 4th-round pick to now maybe a potential, first-day pick, right? Because people say, oh, I didn't realize he had that in his bag, and I didn't realize his ball skills were that good. The other one is Malachi Fields. If you're looking for, bigger body players.
I like him. He started at Virginia. I saw a lot of him. He finished at Notre Dame. I think he led certainly the conference, maybe one of the nation leaders with 17 yards per catch last year.
Yeah, and so he's a really interesting guy to me because, when I first watched the Miami game. It was the first game of the year. I remember thinking, this guy might be like a Niles Paul, where he is so big and he's so physical he converts to tight end. But then the more you watch him, you're like, are his ball skills good enough to help him win down the field, right? Is he gonna be this contested catch merchant? And again, the suddenness to me, watching him yesterday, is still a question I have about him. But he does have some good route running nuance. He plays with a really strong lower body. And so if you kind of say, we're looking for a 2, a good 2 receiver to complement Terry McLaurin, does he fit that bill? I think so. I think he plays physical when he doesn't have the ball in his hands. And I think he's got a skill set that you get excited about.
How bothered do you get? Because with Malachi Fields, to me, a lot of contested catches, fights through contact at catch point, but not a separator. In college, mind you. Now, it's not like he was playing at Virginia. That would bother me more there. At Notre Dame, you're playing, some pretty good corners who are getting drafted from time to time. But I guess my question is, that he's got a skill set that in the NFL, I'm not confident with Terry McLaurin, who's a straight line guy. But when you think about Terry's going to make a lot of contested catches because he's not always going to separate. If that was the book in college, then there's a transition period to the NFL where I worry a little bit. Do you see that with Fields when you watch him?
So, dude, yeah, that's why I kind of made that note about tight end. And again, that's not a knock on him as a college player, but it's just it speaks to the lack of suddenness, right? So another example, so at the Shrine Bowl, for example, there's this guy named Jeff Caldwell from Cincinnati. He's 6'5", he's 209 pounds. He can absolutely rip, man. He is fast, he's big. He's a little bit up and down in terms of effort, which is why he's at the Shrine Bowl and not at the Senior Bowl. But I will say, he separates much better. So as a pure receiver evaluator, I want the guy who separates a little bit better, right? Who's a little bit more sudden and out of cuts. And again, Malachi Fields, he's a big dude. He's not going to separate the same way that, one of those smaller receivers that you just mentioned. I forget his name already. But the kid from Missouri who's small, twitchy, they're not going to separate the same way. So there is a skill set that they both have. I tend to gravitate towards the separator. I mean, that's where the league is going, right? He's not Kevin Coleman, right, from Missouri, right? He's a different kind of player. But the thing is this is what this event is good for me. Is basically saying even though I'm not super comfortable with that type of player, does it play at the NFL level? So when I see him yesterday get a little bit of separation on a slant, when I see him run a nice dig and get some separation, I'm kind of okay, all right, maybe it's not a fatal flaw. Maybe he's developed enough kind of offsetting skills, using his body, understanding how to use his length, and he can play at the next level. But again, that's something that I'm always going to be worried about with those big wide receivers because the suddenness, it's harder when you're taller to be super sudden and out of cuts. And do you have the right mechanisms to offset that is my question. And again, he's a perfect case study for that.
I was talking to someone yesterday about the Senior Bowl, telling me we were down there and the Commanders, and they're like, well, some of the guys you can just kind of cross off the list based on where they're going to go. Like I was thinking about Colton Hood, the corner from Tennessee.
Yeah.
He's a first-round pick. He's going to go somewhere maybe mid-first round. I think he's in the top 20 right now for Matt Miller. But you can't really do it that way because you don't know. Like they could trade back to 17, and now all of a sudden the Sonny Styles that makes sense there is Colton Hood. So I wonder how you is that a guy you're going to watch closely? Are you still like all eyes on everybody, or are you kind of zeroing in on the range that they're at and the positions that they need?
So again, like my process has changed a lot since I've started doing this. And it used to be like, oh yeah, let's focus on the positions and the things that the Commanders need and like really dive in there. But what I've found is like that just doesn't work. Like because at some point, like you're going to need to be I need to rank players. I need to go like 1 to 200 when I do my big board, quote unquote.
That's
right?
a good point. Yeah.
And if I don't have those guys filled in, I don't know where the actual value is when it comes to the draft. Right. So like that's where I'd say like, yeah, I'm going to watch Colton Hood. Yeah, I'm going to watch some of these guys that are kind of bottom of the first round. Like I watched, Caden Proctor as an example. Like there's no way he's going at 7, but I need to know what that value is, like because he's going to either bump somebody down or if Washington trades back and they're looking for a guard, like he might be the pick there at the end of the first round. So that's the kind of thing that I think maybe people don't understand is you need to understand like the composition of the draft. So like if I'm trading from 7 to 20, hypothetically, right? Who are the edge rushers there? Who are the DBs there? Who are the offensive linemen there? Who's the value there? And I think that's one of the things I remember in Dan's initial press conference with Adam Peters. He's talking about the draft 2 years ago. He said Adam does a great job of understanding value and where these players are slotted to go. So even though this guy is number 1 on my board, like where is he with relation to the value at the moment? So if I'm picking at 32, right? And I'm picking again at 64. I love 2 players here. Which one's going to make it to 64, right? I think that's where understanding the flow and the feel and the value of the draft becomes so incredibly important.
Smart way to do it. You mentioned Caden Proctor just because I don't know how many people are super plugged in yet on all of the names flying.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
No, you're good. 6'7", 360, offensive tackle, University of Alabama. And if you've paid any attention to this draft class, you're well versed in his work because he's going to go very early as an offensive lineman in this crop. All right, so Senior Bowl. Anybody else that you wanted to hit on before we come back and do the Shrine game as far as just a couple of names you jotted down or anything that we need to cover?
So again, like I'll give you 4 names here real quick. So 2 offensive linemen, again, that's not a huge priority for the Commanders, but Demetrius Crownover from Texas A&M, plays right tackle. He's 6'6", he's 335, had the longest arms here at the event, 35-inch arms. I always thought a little slow-footed, like I watched the Texas game with him, and Ethan Burke, a guy we're going to talk about from the Shrine, gave him absolute fits. But here at the event was probably the most consistent pass protector on day 1. Now we'll see how that projects over the next couple days. But really good week. Jennings Dunbar from Iowa, he's the right tackle that has these really high run grades at PFF, but a little bit lacking in pass pro. Played guard and tackle, and I thought did a great job in both spots of kind of locking down the pass protection stuff. And again, you can see some of the athletic limitations, but a guy that's a heck of a football player and will probably be a early day 2, late day, or early second round, late first round type of player when it's all said and done. And then Zane Durant from Penn State is a guy that absolutely popped when I watched the film again this morning. He's a undersized defensive tackle from Penn State. I think he's like 6'1", but he is twitchy on the interior. And again, a guy that, like, when you're talking about pass rush depth or adding some explosive juice, again, I don't know where he ends up going because I haven't really fleshed out the big board yet, but a guy that definitely popped. And then I think the other guy is Sam Roush, the tight end from Stanford, because he's 6'5", I think he measured in at 6'5", 265, but big dude, catches the football well, uses his frame well, really nice mover kind of in that intermediate area, like that kind of 5 to 12 yards, has a really good feel for running routes. And so those are 4 guys that I think just wanted to make sure I gave them a shout out before we moved on to the Shrine.
Yeah, Roush, who is a senior this year, 4th year at college, all at Stanford, 49 catches for 545 yards, had 4 touchdowns the last couple of seasons. Zane Durant, you mentioned being a little undersized at 6'1", is almost 295 pounds. kind of like a Barry Cofield type frame where he can move around on the interior a little bit.
Dude, he's got some juice, man. I was watching, I was like, who's the white helmet out there? And then I was like, oh my God, like this dude is like those guys that are like karate masters with their hands, like really quick. I got to go back and watch the tape of him, but I was really impressed with his movement skills as a pass rusher.
He had 11 TFLs and 4 sacks, I think, 2 years ago. So he's put up some numbers at a position where it's hard to do that. All right, let's get to the Shrine Bowl next and just some of the guys that stood out to you. Obviously, you're at the Senior Bowl now. Shrine Bowl's in the rear view. But because of the breaking defensive coordinator news, we didn't get to unload the notebook with you on the Shrine Bowl. So we'll do that next with Logan Paulsen on Take Command. We're back on Take Command, Logan Paulsen and Grant Paulsen. So you made your trip to the Shrine Bowl. You got to watch multiple days of players whose, film you'd seen, whose names you've been studying, but now you brought them to life in person. So who's your short list? I'll kind of fill in with some questions I have on different guys, but the short list of dudes that impressed you the most maybe at the Shrine Bowl.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. Like the guy who I thought had the best week was Ethan Burke, but I liked him coming in. Like he's 6'6", he's 270, he's from Texas. He's got 34-inch arms, like big old hoss, kind of played stand-up linebacker there, like kind of Sam linebacker, but also played a little 5 technique. And I like what he's about, right? I like how he gets down in terms of like physical. He is an awkward build. He's got kind of little skinny legs, like this big upper body, but he's a good football player. And so like when I look at, again, people will probably think I'm crazy, but I look at 71 for a guy that's good at football, like that feels like the right type of guy for me. That's just my personal preference. And again, I got to watch probably 20 more defensive ends, but as of right now.
How would they use him here, do you think? What position?
Yeah, I don't know what kind of system they're going to run yet, right? I don't know what it's going to look like. And so for me, I like that he's got some flexibility. I think that's the thing that I'm drawn to, right? Is he played up stand-up defensive or stand-up Sam linebacker. And so he's dropping into coverage in 7-on-7, but he also goes over a team run and plays basically like a 4 technique, so like a wide defensive end, and it's like holding his own in there. And I think about the things that Flores brings, and they have guys that drop, they have guys that can kind of sit in there and play the run really well. So, and his length, his size, and just his hand usage to me is something that really jumps out. So he was a guy that I thought had a really good week on the defensive line. Wesley Williams from Duke, defensive end, number 97. He's like 6'3", a little bit sawed off, about 267 pounds. But his twitch really showed up. So, again, this is a much different prospect from the guys we were just talking about. We got the Commanders have a 5th, 2 6th, and a 7th round pick. This is where this guy would fall in for me as a rotational developmental piece. That team captain at Duke played extremely hard. And I think the thing that popped for me was the twitch that he played with at the Shrine Bowl, right? Like you're kind of in this land of like, guys that are a little bit too big, a little bit too small, maybe not fast enough. And here's a guy that looked like an NFL prospect. So in terms of the defensive line, like those are 2 names that really stuck out to me, right? As guys that I thought had a pretty solid week. And the other one that is just kind of a little bit of a sleeper for me is Malachi Lawrence from UCF. He is, again, 6'5", 250, a little undersized, like kind of a skinnier build, but is one of these like traitsy. I think we talked about him in the preview show. Traitsy, kind of high upside type of players that, again, might be there in the 5th round when you're picking. So if you're looking for some defensive line depth, I think those guys are just some names that I thought had really good weeks, but also have some traits that I think translate well to the next level.
Yeah, some of the names we're talking about, just to reiterate what Logan said too, with the Shrine Bowl are more, this is day 2, day 3, and this is oftentimes like back end of the draft, right? So Senior Bowl, you're going to get some day 1 guys. You're going to have a lot of the 2nd, 3rd round type guys. This is more in that 4 to 7 range by and large. Now, some of these guys will work their way into the earlier mid rounds. What about Jack Endries? I was glad you got to go see him. He's a guy that I'm intrigued by. Now, I don't know from a Commander standpoint, honestly, like how much of a fit, because I don't think he's going, like, to me, they need an impactful route running, pass catching tight end. And like they've got the Ben Sinnott thing, they've got the John Bates blocking thing. Like there's a type that they need. But I enjoy watching Endries. What did you see from him?
So I think that was the thing about Jack, because I've worked with Jack, right? So I know Jack really well. And so I watched his stuff at Cal. And I remember when I first watched him, I was like, man, this guy looks like he's about 265, 270, like ripping people's face masks off. And then he goes to Texas, and he's much more of a route runner. The offense there is a little bit sputtering, and it's kind of difficult to watch at times. So, when he went to the Shrine Bowl, I've known Jack for 2 years now. And the thing I came away most impressed with was how he handled himself in one-on-ones. Like, again, like tight end route running is different than receiver route running, right? Like, but understanding, again, not to the same level that Zach does it, but how to create leverage, how to break leverage, how to run your routes, how to work your hands, and how to catch the ball away from your frame. I thought it was great. Like day 2, he was maybe the best offensive player there. And again, like he's a little undersized for the run game stuff. He's 200, what do you weigh in? 240 pounds. So again, tall, 6'5", but a little thinner, but he'll compete in the run game now. So I think he's a really interesting player. And to me, he feels like at the moment, like he'll probably be the 3rd tight end selected kind of based on preference. So I don't know if he'll be there for Washington, but he had a great week at the Shrine for sure.
But what drawer do you put him in? Like, you wouldn't consider him a pass catcher first, would you?
So I kind of put him in like just for lack of a better comparison at the moment, is like the Mark Andrews bucket. Like he'll do some stuff for you in line, but he's not like, so that's the thing about Mark is like, he's not this great twitchy athlete necessarily, but he understands how to run routes. Yeah. And I think Jack has a little bit of that to him. So if you were to get him in a high volume, high target situation where you felt good about him on 3rd down, felt good about him working the seam, he has more vertical juice than like Zach, for example, but more route running nuance than like Ben Sinnott or John Bates. If you're able to cultivate that, like I'm not saying he's going to be Mark Andrews, but Mark Andrews, was picked in the 3rd round and had like a pretty solid, very good pro career, obviously. I think there's a little bit of that to him. Now, to what level? That's the question that can't be determined until he makes it to the NFL and starts playing some football. So,
Logan Paulsen, take command. We're going through the notebook on some of the guys that he liked at the Shrine Bowl. You got to see Harold Perkins, who's been fascinating. He was like this really highly regarded edge at one point, who's now played off the ball linebacker. Nobody really knows where it's going to end up for him in the NFL. How did he move on the second level? So,
yeah, he's a guy that I think is really fascinating. Him and Eric Gentry from USC, like they're 2 guys. I talked about them with, Jeremy Green on the draft show that I do, and we kind of had a similar take in that, like, they're not really linebackers. They're not really nickels. They're kind of this hybrid college player, like that star player that you're seeing more and more. And so star in the college environment is basically a linebacker that plays the field like overhang position. And so that's what Perkins does, right? Is he plays this field overhang position almost like a nickel, like a big nickel. He runs really well. He's got good coverage instincts. The more I watched him at the Senior Bowl, the more I like the player. The problem with him at LSU is like sometimes he runs a little hot and cold, like his effort's not always there. But a little bit of that is because he's so far he's almost like he's a safety. He's so far removed from the action, it's like hard for him to get in the mix. But then there's times where, again, he creates these tremendous splash plays as a blitzer. He reminds me a little bit of like Brian Branch, quite honestly, like kind of this, I'm going to blitz, I'm going to make an explosive play. I don't want to be taking on linemen as much. Again, like he's 6 foot. He weighed in at 222, which means he's probably closer to 215 walking around because they know weigh-ins are coming in, so they drink a lot of water, get ready to go. So, again, not a big player, but like, could you play like a Buffalo nickel role for a team early on? Could you be a good special teams player? I think that's kind of what I'm feeling from him. I don't feel every down Mike linebacker necessarily just from a size standpoint, but is he a good football player? Absolutely. And so, like, that's where, like, what do you do with something that doesn't have a clear role? Because I always feel like the NFL has a really hard time with players like that, right? And again, like the exception being last year with Nick Amenwari, right? Like, teams are starting to become more aware and more comfortable with guys like that. But is he going to run like that? Probably not. And so it's like, where do you put a guy that's maybe not as big, maybe not as fast, not really a true linebacker, not a true edge, not a true nickel? Like, what does that role look like at the next level?
Yeah, it's going to come down to scheme and coaching, it sounds like, for him. All right, so then I'll give you the chance, last couple of names you want to throw out there from the Shrine Bowl that you think you'd be bummed if we didn't talk about.
Yeah, so I think obviously Eric Gentry we talked about. I mean, he's just like such a freaky alien of a human being. Like same boat exactly as Perkins, right? But different body type. He's 6'6", he's 225. He's got 35-inch arms, like crazy length, crazy like just like Spider-Man type stuff, right? So you talk about mismatches at the tight end spot. Like the guy that really stuck out to me is Traore. I think I mentioned him on the last show for Mississippi State. Sidhu Traore. He's a former soccer goalie who's playing football now. I think he started at Evan remembers Evan at Arkansas State, something like that. Evan, you can help me out, that'd be great. But
he started at looks like what? Manhattan, Iowa, and Utah.
Yeah, and then he like moved up the ladder of football playing and eventually but did not lose a one-on-one while he was there. And again, he's not the most physical dude because he's 6'3", 6'4", 235 pounds. But if you want a mismatched player at the tight end spot, like he's the guy, man. Like he can absolutely rip. And so imperfect player, but a guy that is intriguing because of the athletic upside. Think like Jordan Reed with him, right? In terms of
really,
yeah, like not that short area quickness, but like that type of athlete, like big,
Arkansas State, Mississippi State. Yeah. So, but like you're talking about takes you off the dribble with footwork kind of thing, and like winning on third down.
A little bit more linear, like a little bit faster, right? And a little bit more like hard break as opposed to the basketball type stuff that Jordan brought. But that type of athlete in terms of being able to win versus safeties, win versus nickel corners. Really interesting.
How deep down the draft board are we talking? It feels projecty a little bit, right?
He's a little projecty, but I think, dude, that's the funny thing about this position, man. Like if he had a really good week, so he's moving up the board. He runs well. Like if he runs like a 4.4 or 4.48.
Oh,
like,
then it's over. Yeah,
it's game plan, right? Like he'll jump well. I think he looks like he's fast on film. Like he looks really smooth. And again, you're looking at the top two guys in the draft at the position this year, and it's Kenyon Sadiq, and then the kid from from Vanderbilt. God bless, I'm getting old here, Grant. Eli Stowers. And so they're both these kind of twitched up, smaller guys, and he kind of feels like that same type of athlete, just not as productive and not as kind of invested in the position as they are. So just an interesting guy to keep an eye on and through the process, because again, like if you're looking for a mismatch piece to make the offense more explosive, and you're sitting there in the 5th round and he's there, like maybe that's the move for you. The other guy that was absolutely mind-bogglingly impressive was Micah Pettis. He's an offensive tackle from Florida State. He's 6'7", he's 350, and I was expecting kind of this, sloth of a man to come out, but he had ballerina feet and can absolutely run. So he was at the Hula Bowl, got there a day late, didn't have a number on his jersey, and this guy, it was like a scene from Major League. Like this dude, you're like, who the heck is that guy? Walks out, no number, gets out there, first pass set, and you're just like, that's the best pass set I've ever seen. Let's see him do it again. Does it 3 times in a row, gets a team run, is just ripping off the ball. And I was like, I don't know who that guy is. I don't know where they found that guy, but that is an NFL offensive lineman who's going to make somebody very happy as a developmental swing guy, at least at the beginning, but probably has some starter upside. So had to mention him because it was like such a unique thing to just watch this dude come out of the barn, like, just walk out there.
No jersey number is funny as hell.
Just absolutely ball out of control. And then the other guy that is interesting to me, and again, was not on my radar, is Jaden Duggar from Ragin' Cajun, Louisiana. So he's interesting because of his measurables. He's 6'4", 240. He's got 34, almost 35-inch arms. So 34, it's 34.7. So like he's right there. He looks like an edge, but plays off-ball linebacker. I thought he did really well in one-on-ones. Had an interception in team. And so again, when you're looking at for like these hybrid edge pieces that Minnesota has, the Van Ginkels, like that's kind of the body type you're looking at there, right? A guy that can rush the passer, a guy that can drop into space. So again, maybe not the biggest household name, but a guy that I thought I'm going to keep my eye on him and see how this process goes for him moving forward.
Yeah, league leader in solo tackles, 64 at 125 stops this year, 13 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, so ultra productive in college as well. Just as a reminder for people too, Logan, I thought we should bring this up here at the end. I mean, right now the Commanders have picks in rounds 1, 3, and 5, and then 2 in round 6 and 1 in round 7. So they're looking at pick 7 and then not picking again until 71. And that's early. That's 7 picks into round 3. And then they don't pick again for another 80 picks or so. I mean, it's not till pick 145 early in round 5. Then they have the 6th pick of round 6 and the 17th pick in round 6 from Minnesota. And then they pick at 223, which is into round 7. So if things stay the same, they have 6 draft picks, but only 2 of those are in the first 4 rounds and in the top 140 in the draft class, which is obviously oftentimes where you're going to find your immediate starters. So we'll see if Adam Peters plans on moving and shaking.
Yeah, I just want to comment on that. So to me, that's why, like you've talked about this a bunch, understanding who we are defensively, who we are offensively, what kind of pieces are going to fit. So like Ethan Burks, just because I can remember his name off the top of my head, right? He's not everybody's cup of tea. But if he's your cup of tea and he fits what you want, like he's going to be a great value add in the 5th round, hypothetically, if he's there, right? So that's where I think Adam Peters over the last couple of years has done a really good job, the back end of the draft, of saying like, this guy isn't for everybody, but he's right for us. And we have a plan and a vision and an identity for this player moving forward. And if you can do that, you can be really devastating there. It's going to be hard, but I think the more I watch these guys from the Shrine, the more I watch these guys down the list in terms of prospect profile and evaluation, the more I'm like, dude, there's some ball players here. And if you pick the right ones for what you want, like they can make an impact for you year one. And unfortunately, Washington right now needs as much help as they can get. So I know everyone wants to sleep on, 71. Like, what are we going to do here? To me, it's these 4 picks at the back end of the draft that are going to be absolutely critical.
All right, good info, good intel from Logan, who is a world traveler, headed to the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl. But you got out of the snow at least. You got out of the ice.
Yep.
I was a little worried about you getting in the air, but it happened. It worked out.
Yeah, here we are down here, and it's nice and sunny, man. Maybe go for a little walk, enjoy not having to shovel snow for a couple days. It'll be a good deal.
Now, will you, I always ask this, will you have like a good meal, like cultural? I'm in Mobile, Alabama. For people that don't know, they do a lot of like, it's a lot of like fresh water, kind of like down there, just like fish and seafood and that kind of deal. Will you do anything like that, or are you going to go gnaw on some chicken in a parking lot?
So it's funny you say that. Last time I was here, I went to it's like a famous barbecue spot. And they went to the counter, and it was like one of those spots you order at the counter. The guy's like, "What do you want?" I was starving. I hadn't had breakfast, and I was like, "Give me a full chicken." And he was like, "Excuse me?" And I was like, "Yeah, just pop that full." Like he's like, "We do halves," and I was like, "Just put the whole damn thing in there." And I just that couple sides ate that thing to the bone. And so it's so funny. That was like the last major meal that I had here. But yeah, there's a nice.
You ate the entire chicken, and what size did you get?
So I think it was like rice and beans, cornbread, and then there was like some greens or something like that. It was really, really good. But this guy looked at me like I was, because it wasn't like a meal designed.
He's probably still telling people about the time this guy walked in and ordered a full chicken and just sat there and ate the whole thing.
Just ate it off the bone. But there's a really nice fish spot here that's like on the water. It's really cool. I don't remember the name of it, but it's. I'm gonna try and get back over there because the food there was excellent.
Nice. All right, good. As long as my guy is well taken care of food-wise. All right, thanks for checking us out. We will keep you covered throughout the draft season on Take Command. Any news breaks on the Commanders front, we've got you covered. Multiple episodes every single week. For producer Evan and Logan, I'm Grant, saying so long.